guys, welcome to our stream for today. We're going to be here talking to you about D&D and education, but before we get started, we just want to acknowledge that our stream today is recorded on various traditional lands, and in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Welcome friends. So indeed, we are here today to talk all things Dungeons and Dragons in the classroom, or as I like to call it, how you can imbue your hobbies onto your students and get paid for it. I'm joined here by some other fabulous educators. And just to kick off, we'll start by introducing ourselves and let you know a little bit about us. In case you haven't already gathered, we are giant nerds and we love it. But we'll start by kicking off. I'll introduce our friend Maddie here.
Hey guys, I'm Maddie, the Mad DM, and I am a teacher at Wollumba High School up here just south of the border. The border to Queensland, not a different country.
Amazing. We can only dream of being able to go to another country. Amazing. Love
Like
it.
Queensland.
And we also have with us today, we have Rob.
Hey, how are we? So I'm Rob, I'm a history media teacher at Alphington Grammar School down here in Victoria. And I'm really excited. I'm just looking forward to talking D&D for 40 minutes.
Amazing. And I am Meek, also known as the blushing_bard. And I also teach at Alphington. I'm a primary school teacher though, so I look after our smaller friends and make sure we get that hobby in real soon and ingrained into D&D from as young as I possibly can. But all three of us are here today to talk to you about D&D and why it is so important in the classroom, why it should be imbued into the curriculum just like everything else. Hopefully there's someone from, the Australian curriculum listening. If you guys want some tips on how to make this a curriculum thing, just hit us up. We also take sponsorship deals if anyone wants to throw us anything. We have no issues with that as well. So the three of us have slightly different journeys about how we came into D&D. So just before we start sharing our expertise for the day, we might just talk a little bit about how we got here. I might go in reverse order this time. I might mix it up and say, so Rob, tell us about your D&D journey so far.
It's great. Like, I've been playing I've been embedded in nerd culture for a very long time, have jumped in from sort of role-playing games and tabletop games since forever. I played a lot of Warhammer in high school. I've sort of played a little bit back in 3.5 edition. But beyond that, I've jumped into 5th Ed a few years back now, sort of 4 or 5 years. I've been playing that sort of on and off with friends. And I enjoyed it. I think as soon as I started playing it, immediately I was like, well, this is something I think I want to take. I love sharing and talking nerd stuff, and I know at school there's plenty of the little kids like that who love this stuff. And I just want to give them a space to do it, because I never found it at school I did. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. What about Maddie? What brings you into the world of D&D?
I recall in year 6 someone said, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons? It's a game where you write a bunch of things on paper and you can choose which door you take, and there's some monsters. And I said, that sounds dumb. You're dumb. And I went and played soccer. And then I got into Warhammer for a little bit just after that with the same crew.
Yeah.
Didn't
cooler.
touch D&D traditionally. Yeah. Played Baldur's Gate video games, and then eventually in the last 4 years as a teacher, we started a Dungeons and Dragons club. Because the Warhammer Club was way too expensive and was excluding a lot of students.
Yeah.
So kicked it off, really liked it, and haven't looked back.
Amazing. Awesome. So you both you kind of played for, for me personally, I've really fairly new to D&D, like 4 years kind of. I tried for ages to get into hobby, was my thing. I kind of knew being a bit of a theatre nerd. And once I kind of heard about Critical Role and started watching that, I fell in love. But I found the hard part was getting in. So my first D&D experience was actually going to a Learn to Play school holiday workshop, thinking it was perfect timing because I was on school holidays, and I rocked up and it was me and like 3 8-year-olds, because I didn't read the room and realise that it was like a kid's Learn to Play D&D. So I had two choices. I could walk out and keep what was left of my dignity, but instead I stayed and I played with, my first D&D game was with 2 8-year-olds. It was great. It was great fun. But yeah, since then I think I found as well, kind of like what you said, Rob, like just bringing the kids need this kind of outlet of something a bit creative. And there's always those kids who, the things that I wish I would have had this as a kid, right? Like, I wish I would have found this hobby sooner. It just would have made so many aspects of my life so much better if I'd had this outlet from a younger age. So yeah, so it's a pretty important thing. So the three of us all come from slightly different angles with you today as well. So for example, I'm going to talk a little bit about some actual curriculum links and how I actually taught a unit to some upper primary kids. And I'll also talk a little bit about D&D with some younger ones and how sometimes we need to maybe tweak some things just to make them a little bit small friendly. But Rob and Maddie are going to kind of take some other angles, looking at some older kind of kids and looking at some other aspects of D&D. So in true fashion though, we're going to roll initiative to see who goes first. So may this, all right, okay. I rolled a 5.
I rolled 6.
Amazing,
And a
great.
10.
Solid, great. This is a solid score to start. I'm glad that we didn't just roll 3 crits. It can only go up from here. Amazing. Well, we'll kick off then with Rob. So, Rob, if you want to take it away, let me just transition through so we can see. There we go. Talk us through creative and critical thinking.
Awesome. So, like, again, immediately I think with D&D, and it was sort of almost my experience of justifying at school, the curriculum is our Lord and Master, and we must always link everything to it. The great thing about the Vic curriculum is it's got this whole section on creativity and critical thinking, where you can easily sort of link up D&D in that space. So I'm just going to talk through sort of like the 3 subheadings there, and talk about how, look, ultimately D&D is this awesome opportunity for kids to use those critical and creative thinking skills whilst being kooky and having a good time. So when I first set up the D&D club at Alphington, I really just wanted to be a space where the kids could be creative. Like, they sort of, it came about one day in conversation where I think in class I just had to use a whole bunch of D20s for an activity, and the kids said, oh, are these for Dungeons and Dragons? I was like, yeah. And it sort of spiraled from there, and it's just sort of been nice there. Like, the kids really touched base, they really enjoyed it and got into it, because it's all of a sudden school wasn't just a place for class, it was a place that they could come there, do something silly, and sort of, you know, all put on silly accents, yell at each other, and have a really good time. I even had like one year 12 who essentially would only come in that particular day of the week because they had D&D on, and that was the drag factor. And I thought that was what it's been really a big success for it, and that's why I think it's something that more and more schools should be doing. Like, things like creativity and sort of critical thinking, we sort of all assume it's occurring on the side in class, but I found that because that's the only way we can engage in these sort of games, it must happen. And that's what's been really good for me. So my general time when I've been sort of setting up adventures for the kids and thinking about it is really aiming for those sort of adventures where the kids get like a really nice broad experience. I've had conversations with friends in the past where, like, you know, we all enjoy just punching things and, you know, say, I punch that, I hit that. And that comes, I think, often from the video game experience. But I've really looked for things where they turn up and they actually have to think. They have to do some actual basic reasoning and can't just shout at people to solve their problems, you know, actually using their social skills. So with that in mind, if you want to start running this at school, I'd always look for things that involve like mysteries or puzzles. The kids love it. They love a good riddle. They enjoy like a weird sort of like mystery to sort of work their way through. And it forces them into those other aspects of the game where they have to, you know, talk to someone, roll some dice, and it's not just like, how much blood can we shed today? I really like, we ended up buying Candlekeep Mysteries, and I really love, I think it's joy of extra dimensional space. It's great because it's one of those, there's a mystery, but there's also sort of lots of different situations, and I will always recommend, I often call it the Womford Pie Festival, but it's Banquet of the Damned. Again, these style of adventures, because they're a bit more like mystery based, it's like, go talk to this person, they'll give you a clue, go talk to this person, they'll give you another clue, and you sort of like net something together. It works really well, all that socialization, rolling investigation, and I've run some like Banquet of the Damned I think 7 times, and every child has taken a different approach to it, and it's always really fascinating how they like all like focus in on one individual thing, and it works really well. And I think that's what I found, like that sort of deeper thinking you start to see really come up. Like, look, I could be a really hardcore rules lawyer with the kids, but often I'm like, look, if they want to do something, unless it's completely zany off the wall, I'm very much a big believer in the yes stand. You might occasionally say, that's probably going to have some negative consequences and stop them. But ultimately, like, it is amazing watching them. You force a lot of table talk. You say to the kids, okay, we're going to stop. You're going to come up with a plan. Tell me what you want to do and go through it, which whilst I play with a bunch of my adult friends, they never do. Their solution is often just insult my characters, make me sad, and burn everything down. So it's really good. And that's what's really good. I run the sessions flexibly. I think they give them problems to solve. And this is the really hard one. Let them fail. I think I had one session where a kid, for whatever reason, decided he would hit his way through a roof with a hammer. And that was his solution to get the jump on the bad guy. And he spent the entire session hitting the roof with a hammer. I'm like, roll a dice, he'd roll a 7. I was like, okay, you hit the hammer, nothing happened. And he was a bit mopey at the end. I was like, well, afterwards I was like, well, did you think a bit deeper than just hitting a hammer on the roof? Like, if you went home, climbed onto your roof and started smashing it with a hammer from the shed, would you break through? He's like, probably not. So I found that's really the good thing, where these kids are forced to think a bit differently. They come up with zany plans, but also kind of getting them to think structurally and go, okay, what's going to work here, and come up with potential solutions. And yeah, so that's what I really love. I'll hand it on.
Yeah, awesome. So do you find, just coming back, so do you find, well, with the puzzles and things, do you have like tangible puzzles as well, or is it more just kind of word puzzles and things?
It's a mixture. Look, the joy of being at school is that there's a printer. I have done a lot of last minute, like hitting print jobs, running things off and running down. But I find a mixture. Like, I think the image I've got, which is like looking up for puzzles for toddlers, is still the true experience. Like, you don't want to like break their brains.
Yeah.
But like good riddles. I think I stopped a group for 20 minutes with a riddle I vaguely remembered from The Hobbit, where the answer I think is mountain, and
Right.
They were just stuck forever. So you just sit there and they start asking. So it's just that I love watching doing. I've given them jigsaws to put together where they have to slice everything together.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's just anything. I love that sort of stuff. I think it's good because, again, it teaches them, okay, look, a lot of adventures still end with them cutting people and hitting this and burning that down. Fire is always the great solvent. It solves all sorts of problems.
It really
But
does.
yeah, I think a mixture. But it's one of those things, you don't have to like go spend big. Like, the internet is a grand trove of riddles and puzzles. And look, you can link things in loosely and the kids enjoy it, because hell, it's sometimes that stuff that we as teachers kind of throw to them, sort of like, there's 5 minutes left, do it. And kids eat them up. They love riddles. So, doing it with purpose is even more exciting.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, go for it.
Just want to check in. Do you have any like ex machina when people really hit a brick wall?
I roll with that theory of sometimes, like, look, if they come up with a solution that sounds good enough, you just like that's it. You figured it out in one.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that sort of flexibility. Sometimes having a solid answer is really good, but like, look, if they come up with an answer, you're like, yeah, that works too. And I think, look, but that is easier too. Like, with that Banquet of the Damned, the whole thing is you've turned up for a pie festival, and then all of a sudden you're approached by someone in charge of the town saying, someone's house burnt down, go figure it out. And there's a whole sort of town for them to roll around, and there's lots of little clues. So as a result, depending on where they go and who they speak to, they'll end up sort of like piecing it together. It always leads towards the same point, but they'll piece it together differently. So, I've had one group sort of do a real police interrogation, like go after this guy and shout at him, whilst another group sort of asked around quite passively, quietly, eventually found a child who knows a bit of information, had a conversation with them and got the information they needed. So that flexibility is key. But like, look, ultimately it's like, here's an open platter of issues, go figure it out, and you let them see what they do.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think it's also super important, that idea of like giving them space to be creative as well, because I think there is so much in, like I said, in the curriculum, like even in the lower years, we find that we have to get them to a certain point and you get so focused on, well, I just need to teach you these things. I don't have time for you to kind of go off and think. Like I'm going to talk about like writing narrative stories and how the irony of how they become so non-creative when we're like teaching them to such a structure. But yeah, amazing. Awesome. Well, next up was definitely not me. I rolled a 5. But you weren't far off with a lit 6 there, Maddie. Awesome. So Maddie is going to talk us through some social. Now, because you have a slightly different take as well. You have also used the school you work at, but you do some youth work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. I will flip over so you're now center screen. There you go. About the social and emotional development through Dungeons & Dragons, and I put parentheses and TPKs.
And what, sorry?
And TPKs.
And TPKs, yes. We will not speak of that. So I ran a club in a school for about 3 years. Me and one of the older students sort of organically decided we would do it. We played a few other things with the school, and then we're like, I think we need to do Dungeons and Dragons. The first thing I really liked, which is one of the most unique things about Dungeons and Dragons, and I only know like one other board game. I'm not a big like board game and gamer person, like to research new and interesting things, but it's Dungeons and Dragons is cooperative, and that's. Yeah, so we used to play Warhammer, and it was cool, but you're always fighting each other. You can do little team battles and stuff. But Dungeons & Dragons, you got everyone besides the Dungeon Master. They're all on the same team, and the Dungeon Master's secretly on your team anyway, or not so secretly. And they're basically a teacher, or a referee, which is also something that teachers do. So as a teacher, I slotted into that, and yeah, we had a lot of students who, at first I just went for whoever would want, who expressed open interest, but then I just started a campaign to make sure that I was in a small school at the time, to make sure that everyone had a chance to be like, hey, I'll try that out, and work with them with their confidence, because some people can't even express that. I think at one point it was just harassing kids come play, but eventually you get a group of people, and now I've got a group has approached me in my current high school, and they're setting the times and they're setting the place. Awesome. And I'm just my thing is just it's an open door. I'm not going to get involved in stopping anyone coming in, and yes, I'll let you guys deal with that. I think in the last school I was very much like I had to talk to a few students, and you have to like kind of coach people through. Look, why are you being exclusive, or why are you being inclusive, and let's talk about these things. So things come up just naturally, because the other part of Dungeons and Dragons is. It is the most social game that I know. Yeah. I do not know a game that is, besides other proxy games that are similar, I do not know a game as social as Dungeons & Dragons, which is the biggest irony because it's considered like one of the largest, the most nerdiest things that are there. And then all of a sudden people have got to talk and figure things out, like Rob was saying, like problem solve, and they've got to do it together. And so I have a collection now. I do youth work. I'll have some people are on spectrums or have learning difficulties and things like that. And just coming together. And because the difference between Dungeons and Dragons, I guess, in real life is you can sort of pause things. Yeah. You can discuss things. The Baldur's Gate had the classic pause button, and you did 90% of your stuff paused, unpause, pause again. So you can stop and you can discuss things like metagame and talk and go, okay, guys, what are you doing right now? What do you think's going to happen? And all of a sudden you have people really just realizing, how is that, is this good for the rest of the party? That became a mantra at one point for me. How does this benefit the party? And so people come together and just work together. And all of a sudden I've just found people who would have never actually hung out. They just have this friendship. Yeah. And it's, yes, the accomplishments are imaginary, but again, most accomplishments in school are imaginary if you think about it.
Really? That's a whole nother panel.
Like you won a letter. Anyway, yeah. So all of a sudden they've accomplished things together. They've gone on adventures together, and they might not have even met each other and had a good conversation. And then it just kind of spirals back out into their real life. All of a sudden they know other hobbies that they're into, and they start hanging out, and rather than it being like just only confidence within the Dungeons and Dragons realm, which I think a lot of people think it's escapism, you're not developing real skills. No, I found that people just pull it back out. Yeah. Because they're like, wait a second, if I can do it here with magic, maybe I can do some of the things in real life without magic. Yeah. So, I'm not always so structured, but basically I've just got the students come together. I kind of give them a semi-open world and just kind of make sure they're going somewhere seemingly rewarding by the end of it. And just keep an eye on them, and they sort of do the rest themselves, which is another great thing. You're facilitating more than calling the shots.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, and from that you just, with a bit of your own, like training and research, it develops social and well-being all along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find as well, I'll come back to the three of us, did you find as well that, like you're saying there, like with new friends being made, like you saw people, like actual friendships, like kids form those? Yeah. That's huge, right? Like being able to have that power to bring people together and, provide an opportunity, maybe because, maybe sports, all the other clubs that are offered aren't the things, so being able to have that extra avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kids, some of them are really good at making friends, but some of them aren't. And some of them do not like each other.
Yeah.
And some will never be like good mates, but some of them will. They eventually like, hey, we've done something together.
Yeah.
Like, and they'll stick up for each other. And I mean, this is slightly different, but I had this one primary school student come into our high school club, and then a year in, he has his mates come in. They're all in year 7 now, and he's like, guys, this is not just a game about like fighting things. It's a game about story.
Oh.
And
that's the best.
Whereas the year before, he's like, can I hit something now? Like that was what he'd say every session.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's just that development. So yeah, friendships happen that weren't otherwise going to happen. And then people just learn like a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, that guy's a bit quirky and that girl's a bit like this. But man, we do, like, I need them. Like, they're the one that heals me when the dragon bites my side. like, they can do things.
Yeah, for sure.
They're a human resource.
I think that shared experience is a huge part. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to ask, have you found that it's been a positive for sort of like their attendance and like wanting to be at school, like especially considering the mess the last 2 years have been?
Oh yeah. Sadly, I didn't get to do too much in the last few weeks. Actually, right now we're back. We were back at school last week, and Dungeons and Dragons Club couldn't run because they're from different year groups. And then the 4 weeks before that, I wasn't organised enough to do Zoom. But yeah, there'll definitely be some students. I think you mentioning before, there's one student they won't really show up, but all of a sudden they're there on D&D day. Like they're there. And they push through everything else. So because it's often up for me, I had to do it after school initially, and now push through a whole 6-hour day of school just so they can play some Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm not going to lie, on our D&D afternoon, that's what gets me through some days. As a teacher, it's okay.
Yeah, you used to get me through it too. Oh yeah. It's hard. Yeah, I just want to say it was hard actually. Some of those D&D days, I had time aside to prepare for Dungeons and Dragons. And then someone did something, and someone had to be sent home, and you finally get there, like, okay, I'm drawing the map now.
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna be drawn while you play it, but it was worth it.
It's like live fog of war, right? It's just live fog of war.
Yeah, for sure.
You're totally not improving it on the spot. No DM ever improvs, right?
You're just making this up on the spot. I'm like, no, yes and no.
I mean, this is, to be honest, I think this is a big part of why teachers as well, like I've now started to find a lot more educators that do D&D, because deep down, we are just dungeon masters in a classroom. Like, we are just improving all the time, trying to give the illusion that we've got it. Oh, like 100%. 100%.
Why the DM screen's important. You hide your disorganisation behind it.
Yeah. I wish I did have a real life DM screen I could put up in my classroom. That would be so good. Instead of the kids looking at my desk and being like, are you okay? No, I'm not, but thank you for your consideration.
Just bring your DM screen.
Put it up. That's not a bad idea when I need like time. Like might be my little symbol. Okay, guys, if the DM screen's up, you can't talk to me. It's independent work time. I like it. I actually might steal that. Amazing. Awesome. Well, just to kind of pivot slightly, I mean, to be honest, my kind of what I'm going to talk about really encompasses both of what you've already discussed, but I'm going to focus it on some smaller friends. So I'm very lucky to teach in a primary school. I've mostly done upper primary though, so it's pretty much middle school, like that grade 5, 6. But I have also had a little bit of experience with some of our smaller friends. But what I was going to share, because a big part of any educator that's watching this has probably attended many a professional development in their time. And what we like from these things is concrete skills, right? Things you can take. So I'm about to share with you my own little unit that I ran based on creative writing and based on Dungeons and Dragons. I first of all trialed this in an all-girls school, which was fabulous because I think as well there is definitely, I think there is still a gender disproportionate with the hobby as well. It's definitely changing and it's definitely becoming far more positive. But I know, like when I was first trying to get into the game, walking into a game store by myself was quite an intimidating experience the first few times. And what I loved about it as well, kind of tossing what both Rob and May just said with the girls, when we played this first game after we'd done this unit, I sat them down and one of the first characters they met was like a map maker because they wanted to buy a map, and I'd given them gold and that was all great. And so I put on the stupid voice and I said to them, okay, so the map is going to be 25 gold for you to buy. And these two girls whispered at each other and they're like, okay, we'd like to stab him. And I was like, oh, no, we've just misunderstood the rules there, guys. You have money. You can just pay for the map. And they just kind of nodded, looked at each other and went, no, we're going to stab him. And I was like, great. I've created murder hobos. This is great. This is my legacy. But to get to that point to play a game, so my school, I do a lot of inquiry-based learning as well. And so I tend to kind of follow the inquiry cycle with a lot of things. So this is my unit on upper primary narrative writing unit. I do find when I've taught this in year 6, I can be a bit more flexible because we don't have the NAPLAN, cloud hanging over us. But in year 5, I've used something similar as well, just with a little bit more structure and a little bit more timed practices and things for NAPLAN. But for year 6, it was definitely, personally, I preferred running it for that age group. But so we have our tuning in, so a provocation. So I started by just reading out excerpts from the Dungeon Master's Guide, reading out like the descriptions of what, monks were, or reading out the description of what an elf was, or reading out the description of what a bugbear was. And essentially what I had the kids do is just as they were listening to me read them out verbatim from the book, which is a lot of quite high vocabulary and a lot of very flowery language, I just had them draw what they were imagining. And that was a great starting point to introduce this idea of imagination and, how we then looked around and everyone's bugbear looked so different. The keywords that people had highlighted was so different. And even when we start talking about elves, there's a few words in there that talk about them being very finesse and classy, and seeing the swole elves compared to the high-end fashion elves that came out as well. And that kind of just got the kids essentially piqued their interest because a lot of them, this was their first exposure to not only D&D but to fantasy. I think that's changed now. There's a book series called Wings of Fire that I don't know if it's popular in the high school. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but Wings of Fire is very cool in the upper primary grades. It's about dragons and fantasy and it's got very cute covers. So maybe that's changed in recent years, but when I did this the first time, fantasy wasn't a huge thing. Just getting them to kind of pique their interest. And I also have a Kahoot I've since found, Kahoot that I made, that was all about D&D creatures. So I would put up a random D&D creature and a list of 4 names. I might have a gelatinous cube, and then it could also be a jelly square, and then I'd also call it a, random names, and the kids had to just guess point blank what they thought they were. Which kids love it. They love when they can't win a Kahoot. It fills me with joy. The rage that they get filled with when I'm asking them to answer a question that they clearly have no knowledge about. Fills my man at heart. So that was my tuning in, right? And so already from that, I could hear the kids that come up to me on lunch duties and they start to be like, what was that thing you spoke about? Or what is this creature? Or can I be an elf? And I'm like, oh, just chill, guys. Just chill. This is, I'm just putting the bait out. So then we started having to go into the finding out stage. So this is where I actually got to teach them about fantasy novels, teach them what is fantasy as a genre, who are some famous authors. We did some author studies in there. And then the way that I've really taken this, because especially in primary school, is kids are taught to write stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a beginning and a middle and an end. So I started to introduce the idea of, well, why can't we write a backstory as a narrative? It's still a creative fiction story. It's just a slightly different format. So it gives them that breadth. Again, in year 5, I didn't quite have that luxury. I had to stick a little bit more to a kind of quintessential narrative structure just to make sure I was preparing them in the best for that rubric. So it's a really great time to delve deeply into, things like The Hobbit is a great Excerpts from that are great to teach to 5 and 6. 4 might be a little bit trickier, but there's also modern fantasy now. I even show them things like Percy Jackson and that kind of Greek theories, Greek gods and stuff, as well as another example of what fantasy can look like. I mean, we've got the D&D Theros, to kind of partner with that, so that's always fabulous. Once we'd done that, we'd found out what fantasy is. We then started to sort out, well, what does it mean to be a hero? And I've written here the hero's journey. It really should be the, and then in quotation mark, hero's journey, because we all know in D&D, you want to be the hero, and so often you end up the bad guy. You're one fireball away, one rogue fireball away from not being the hero. But this was kind of also in a little bit coming to like the personal and social aspects as well. This is where I kind of spoke to them about, what does a hero mean to you? Let's look at some characters like the heroic trope in media. Let's look at heroes and villains. Let's look at, is that so black and white? And then let's talk about what you would want to be as a hero. Some people as a hero want to be the brawn that slays the giant beast and saves the town. For some others, they want to be the people that, maybe, start an orphanage in a town for all the people that have, maybe lost their families because of rogue adventurers with rogue fireballs. What hero means to you, right, is its own thing. So that sorting out stage really was great to get the kids starting to want to embody, and also starting to develop a little bit of empathy as well, trying to put themselves in someone else's shoes, and what would it be like to be a rogue in this kind of fantasy world? What would I want to do? What would my goals and my kind of motivations be? From there as well, we kind of delved a little bit deeper then into the actual writing. So by this stage, I would have got them to write a draft of their backstory. Just tell me about who they are, what they look like, where they grew up. Very, very basic. And then in the going further is where I now show them, okay, how can you show, don't tell? How can you add some really beautiful descriptive language? How can we, instead of you telling me that you're a swole elf, what could you describe about what you're wearing or your stance to tell me that you're a swole elf? And just, and then because they have that connection now to this character that they own, they want that character to be the best. They want you to be able to imagine their character. Like I had girls when I did this the first time going home and like drawing their own sketches of their own, like making OC character art, and like coming to me the next day being like, oh, I'd found this like, sword I really want them to wield, or I'd found this. And I'm like, oh, my precious, like this is the dream, right? This is what I'm trying to, this is like hitting all the boxes. But that ownership was super important. I think once they were developing their own character, they had that agency as well, which is a big part of inquiry learning. And I think even in the senior schools, like it's just a big part of, I think, pedagogy across the way now. We're seeing that student agency is super important. After that, we started sharing our stories, introducing storytelling as a medium. I think something as well that unfortunately, especially with my kids once they get to grade 5 and 6, all that dramatic play, that getting to be, dress up and be a princess is kind of seen as not cool anymore. And even just the idea of telling stories, people are much more open to recounting a movie they've seen than telling their own stories. So in this kind of section, I got the kids to, start talking about who their characters were. And we also had some beautiful things where suddenly, sisters were popping up, or suddenly people trained at the same school and they're going back to their backstory to connect their stories. Suddenly I had little like factions forming that, the kids wanted to create because they all wanted to be connected, which was amazing. And then my favorite part, and I think probably the most important part of learning, is the action. Okay, you've taught the kids all this stuff, so what are they going to do with it? And for me, that was playing a game. That was actually letting them play a game. And this took a little bit of, I'm not going to lie, a bit of tweaking. We had, because this was a unit we were running across 3 separate grades, it meant that I had to rely on my co-teachers, so that like a double period on an afternoon, I ran for one class and we did rotations. So the kids only really got to play for like 30, 40 minutes. But we did have to do it over like 3 afternoons, just because I was the only one that felt comfortable running the game for the kids, which is fair. Learning DMing is, there's a lot of people that are still nervous about that. So I will say one thing with this is the logistics of the actual play is slightly tricky. And I've even found now with like our D&D club at school is that I have far more kids that want to play than I have DMs able to play. And maybe that's something we can talk about in a second, about how we actually make that happen. But I just want to quickly touch on to wrap that up. So look at all these outcomes, right? Once you teach this way, I was creating text, it was language devices, it was point of view, it was genre study, it was author study. We talked about the historical context of what it meant to be in, like, say, a medieval time. That is just a few things that I was able to tick off through that unit. You can also do cross-curricular links as well. Like for us, we were doing a unit on imagination and creativity, so we were able to cross off a lot of things there as well, because, like, literally that is what D&D is, right? So not only did I get to force my hobby upon my students, but I got to hit a lot of curriculum links along the way, which was great. It was very, very fabulous. And I'll come back to our team here. So yeah, I think it's just nice to know that there is, as much as we can run our after school clubs and they're really important and really great to get together, you can actually put this in the classroom as well. And even the kids that are so not into D&D will find an aspect of it that they love. And maybe they won't, and that's also okay, because sometimes you're not going to love everything you do. But yeah.
I was about to ask actually that. How did you find with, like, kids who were like, nah, fantasy is not for me? Like, how did you sort of pull them into the experience?
Yeah, I think, look, I can only think of a couple of people that didn't really, and even with that, as long as, when I've recently tried to do it, focusing on more of the combat aspect. Okay, so how about you're just a soldier, or how about you're just a this, like, imagine what kind of character do you want to be, and we can kind of fit it in. Yeah, I did find as well with the first time I ran it at the girls' school, there was definitely at the start a few people that were very much like, this isn't my thing, but also herd mentality. Once a few people get into it, right, it becomes cool. So, get the cool kids in first is what I'm saying. No, but once you do, and if you're excited about it as well, like I had been talking about D&D almost every day. Like in my class every day, there is some reference to it, whether it's me rolling a D20 to decide who goes in thing, or whether it's just me lecturing my kids, whether it's me practicing a voice as well. I like to do my role every day in an NPC voice. My poor students, they have to suffer so much. So my kids are very much ingrained in it without, like, they don't get a choice. But naturally then they kind of want to give it a go. So yeah. But yeah, I have found now with the club though, we've got more people wanting to play than DM. So maybe this is a question I might throw out to both of you. Like, how can we, help our little friends? Because we are but one DMs. It's very, very rare to find, multiple teacher DMs in one school. What can we do to try and help our little friends to, take on the DM mantle? Have you guys had any experience with that? Or plans to?
Remember the TPK?
Yeah.
TPK, did something.
Yeah.
I'll quickly jump in. I usually will go through, especially the more experienced players, and go, do you want to run a session?
Yeah.
And offer to be available there for resources, because we all run ours in a homebrew world, so it's not a module. It's all made up. So often that'll be something to do with their character backstory. If you you can DM the town that your character's from.
Cool.
And you'll make that up. Stuff like that. That's one way, I think, getting them to lean into their backstory.
Yeah, cool.
So I'll have a map, and I'll go pick apart, I'll tell them, I'll explain where the different races come from. Okay, so you got this section here. Yeah. That's yours. Yeah. And if you got something that your character, your sister's gone missing or whatever, then you go back to that. And give them a sort of one-shot in a campaign. That's something that I've had some success with.
Yeah.
But and then everyone can get a go. Not everyone will do it, but some people will be like, oh, I love this. And some people are like, I'm never doing this again, even if they're really good.
But that's like giving them a safety net, right? It's like giving them a chance, and you're still there to help. And awesome. That's cool. Because I know Rob and I, we've talked about this coming, because we've got this problem with, we've got so many kids that want to play, and alas, only us to DM. But yeah, we're looking at that's a really great idea, though, getting them to take a one shot in an existing game. I'd be kind of thinking just something like Lost Mines as well, like giving them a pre-made, very simple module. But yeah.
I was about to say that too. I think my thing that I've really taken out of this is like not fearing, like I love creating, but like not fearing like here is a set module that gives, like especially because we've been talking about training the kids up, here's structure, run it the way you want to, but like use this as a basis. And I think that really helps because like we all have grand ideas, but if there's something that says like you talk to this person, their opinion is that, like here are their 3 secrets, like structure I think can be really good. And I think it's like any new skill, like I think there are students I've definitely noticed with my high schoolers who would probably be keen to take the reins, but like you need to give them that sort of like real, like, you know, be a teacher, support the kids, give them structure, make things make sense, and be there as a resource so they can run it and feel good about it all. So like I think that's the key thing.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, we do have a couple of questions. I mean, that was kind of an organic question that came up, but we do have a couple of questions that people did want answered. So the first one was asking about, did the kids find the rules complex? So I think it's very good if we divvy this, because I definitely think I'll have a slightly different perspective with my smaller friends. Rob or Maddie, what did you guys find? How did you find kids with the rules? Maybe Rob first, and then we'll go Maddie. Sorry.
You're all right.
I'm all good. So you might hear my wife talking to her father in the background, but that's okay. They found the rules hard. Like, look, ultimately, hell, like I've got these books are thick, and as a DM, I feel like I don't always know all the rules. So I've really lent, when I've taught, I've said like, here are the key things. I've got these lovely color-coded sheets I use where I'm like, I ran it during a week of like during English week a few years back. I ran like quick 1 hour pickup sessions at lunchtime, and I had color-coded character sheets where I was like, okay, make an intelligence, like, you know, make an investigation. It's in the pink section, and so the kids will look for pink alphabetical. So I don't think you like. With older kids, so these were kids who were sort of year 8, 9 higher, I found that they had enough sort of their heads together, they could figure it out, but it was very much like, okay, you're in this situation, here are your 3 things you can do. And like, I love the depth, but I think, like, I only usually get 45 minutes to an hour to run, and you can't go, hey kids, here are the rules, go learn them, because they're not going to. So oftentimes I find that you're sort of hand-holding. Exactly. Yeah, no, you'll see that my Dungeons Master's Guide is still in the plastic.
Isn't everyone's?
But what I was going to say is, like, the rules are there, and I think it's about, like, you focus on the key things. They understand big concepts like health, strength, dexterity. Like, they get that stuff. And then, like, spell slots. A kid's like, I want to blast this spell 3 times. Well, no, you can't. But I focus on the basics, like a round of combat. Oh, okay, you want to do this, roll a dice. Oh, you're actually not, like, you want to intimidate? Cool, you're good at that. Go ahead. And they start clicking it slowly together. But it's like how I've played every sort of role-playing game ever. Like, you kind of slowly piece the rules together. And look, just accept that they might not understand the complexities of grappling, but I insist that no one understands how grappling works. So,
I hate grappling.
That's fair. That's fair. What about you, Maddie? How'd you find with the rules, introducing them?
I had the lucky opportunity recently to teach an online class on how to play Dungeons and Dragons, which I just made a 2-part campaign instead. I tell people this dice is different to all of the other dice, and this is the one that determines success and failure, and this is like damage and healing. So once I've got that done, because whoever uses a percentile dice, once I've got that done, I say Dungeons and Dragons, you don't need to know any of the rules. That's my job. It helps if you know the rules, but you can know none. And I said, and your first time will probably be still, because I base this off experience of players' feedback, you'll still find a lot going on that you don't understand. But you are to act what you would feel like in that situation. And if you can do that, you're going to be better than anyone who knows any rules. And then, just explain each time they try to do something. I just sort of take them through the motions, explain the action economy as we're doing the actions, or just before. I'll go, hey, I think I see what you're trying to do. This is what might happen. Do you want to do that? And from there, they just get the rules as they go. And then there'll be some kid who goes, I got the monster manual. And I'm like, you're not allowed to look at that.
That is bad.
Someone will pick up the rules along the way and they'll read into it. And then they help each other out. And so, because bit by bit, but they never need to know anything.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100%.
And some of them
Jump
link
in
to
on-
that. Yeah, go
If I
on.
can just jump in on one thing you said too, like I really think that's important when you said like get the kids to act out what they want to do. Like
Yeah.
it's the same when we play. It's never fun with someone saying like, I roll to persuade them and then just roll a dice. Like, you know, like no,
Yeah.
talk persuasively.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to like obviously if
Yeah.
like describe how you're investigating and it sort of starts clicking together because then you can, you know, behind the screen, like yeah, they describe a really good investigation, lower the DC, they roll a dice, and it's like, oh, you got an 8. Oh,
Yeah.
look, you know what, because you described it so well and it sounds like you're being thorough, that's fine. Like I think
That's a
that's the sort of
special
stuff I
bonus,
found
yeah.
is good. So and then all of a sudden, as you said, it clicks. They don't need to know the rules because the rules are just like interact in this imaginary world where you
Yeah.
know, we can be flexible and things can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think the best players that I've found in Dungeons and Dragons are players who have not played Dungeons and Dragons, or have kept that understanding, and also girls.
Wow. What can
No,
I say?
seriously. If like you were talking about that issue with gender stereotypes and things, girls will teach you how to play D&D. That's what I found.
By being complete murder hobos is my experience, but sure.
So yeah, but if they are, that's normal. Like everyone else is already doing it, but they're usually like, let's get into this on a like they have more social intelligence all the time,
Let's deploy.
and all of a sudden it's like, that's where that kid was like, we haven't had a fight in like 3 sessions, but this is awesome.
Oh, that's the win. When you can get through a session without combat, that's the win.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm not even going to add too much because I do the color-coded sheets. I think is a fabulous idea. I use that, and I think that works for adults as well who you're introducing to the game. But I'm also with Maddie. I'm a bit like rule of cool as well. Like if the kid wants to do something, they can explain they're really into it. I sometimes hate to be like, no, actually, if you turn to page 325 of the like manual, you can't do that. I prefer to be like, yeah, sure. It's not really a rule, but whatever. So my kids are probably going to go into the wilderness of playing D&D and think that they can do all this cool stuff that I told them. I was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Maybe that's not the best.
It definitely helps to tell. Yeah, I would definitely tell the kids the skills are in alphabetical order.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But I think it's good too because when they're playing their own character, like it seems like a lot's going on, but it's like they have that one thing to focus on as well. Like they don't need to know how the barbarians rage works if they're a rogue.
Yeah.
You know, and vice versa, and they don't need to know like level 2 stuff while they're level 1.
Yeah,
Except for druids, you have to tell them they can shapeshift at level 2 or they'll never be a druid.
That's fair.
That's the only reason they're playing it.
That's true. I mean, yeah, pretty much. And then as a DM, you're like, no, please don't be a druid. I can't have all these things prepared. Awesome.
Half of my work is... all my work as a DM is druids.
Great.
Yeah, go on.
Amazing. Well, our next question was about how supportive was management. And I guess this is a little bit more the logistics of actually getting, because it's all very well and good to have this idea of wanting to run D&D, but then transitioning that to actually do it in school. I said I was very lucky my first time I did it through the curriculum, so it became part of the lesson, and for what I was doing I didn't need to worry about books and stuff. I had just a couple of maps of myself and tokens, but yeah, what about other experiences of how schools have kind of taken on, especially when your maybe leadership don't know what this game is, or maybe still know Satanic Panic from the 80s? What's been your experience? Might start with Maddie this time. We'll go the other way.
Yeah, usually I got offered a place to do it, and someone would lock the doors, and then no one asked me any questions when I printed a lot of stuff. And that's pretty much it. Like I try to run things seamlessly.
Yeah.
I didn't do much, basically, but I didn't have resistance.
Yeah, amazing. Everyone was pretty supportive of it. What about Rob? I'll get your perspective.
Yeah.
It was weirdly mixed. Like I think there was more like anxiety about like my workload initially. Like I think I floated it, and I think again it's that thing of like, well, what is this Dungeons and the Dragons? This is an unusual thing. So like it wasn't that there was a hard no, but it was like, oh, what about your load allotment? What about this? Where I was like, oh well, you know, I'm full of energy and this will be great.
Yeah.
At my school, it's since changed where we've got a program that's like where it's part of our load to sort of run clubs and everything like that. So that's maybe not really helpful, but realistically, initial like sort of like more reticence in just the sense that this is something unusual and outside the box,
Yeah.
which has then shifted to really positive. As I said, I ran something during English week and it was a big success where like, I burnt the candle at both ends to run a lunchtime session. There was a recess and lunchtime session, I now remember. So we'd do the first intro in the 20 minutes of recess and then finish it up by the end of lunch.
Yeah.
It was hard and fast.
Yeah.
But I think just once, like, because of the weird resistance, by doing that, it got the name out there, and then all of a sudden it sort of like the genie was out of the bottle and it had to run at school. And since then it's been sort of, despite the challenges of COVID and remote learning, it's sort of been self-sustaining. So like once we're back at school, it will start back up again. The kids are super psyched and we'll get straight into it. So it's been that sort of experience. And otherwise, the school's sort of weirdly supportive. Like, I've had a small budget to buy some equipment. I have dice at school now. We have some books. Things like, again, I really like Tales from the Yawning Portal and Candlekeep, just because it's a bunch of short adventures. Once we get to the point where we can get kids to run their own campaigns, it's great to be able to go, whoop, here you go. Here's the things, off you go. And I think that's been good. So, yeah, like, I think my experience, if I did it all again from the start, would be to sort of really sort of possibly either do it, as you said, Maddie, just do it and damn the consequences, or be really explicit where it's look, this is a thing that the kids, like, frame it from like the kids want it. And I think nowadays, even it's only been a few years, I think the world's changed. Everyone's like, D&D is super cool. It's more like your school doesn't have a D&D club. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Forbid.
And then we can just get into inter-school D&D competitions somehow. I don't know what they look like, but once we can get it into the, like, into the competitive realm and there's like pennants involved, we'll be schmick. It'll be everywhere. Amazing. I definitely agree. I think it's, in the last few years especially, I think a lot more schools, like I've had, the fact that I've done D&D in schools on my resumes and stuff, and definitely going to schools now, they're like, I don't know what this is, but like, tell me about it. And it's only ever been positive kind of reactions. Obviously, depending on the genre of school you're in, speak to your management. If you feel like, having things where there's, deities and other paladins and, faiths and stuff, and you feel like that might be tricky, maybe just, have that conversation first. We're not going to encourage you to, go against any grains. But there is also things you can tweak. There are other systems you can use as well. There's lots of cute, like Humblewood's a really cute one. I mean, it's still got other deities in it, but there's lots of ways you can cutify and simplify things down and still have the essential, all those social emotional things and creative things without the D&D brand. Awesome. Well, just to wrap up, and kind of you touched on it there, Rob, but like talking about, now that we've all kind of had an experience introducing D&D into our classrooms and into schools and into with kids, what do we want to do differently? So I think, Rob, you just kind of touched on like what you wanted to, was there anything else you wanted to add that you would do differently?
As in do things differently?
Yeah,
I think, look, be less hard on myself initially. I think in my initial experiences, again, I had to be everything and do something of, like, I really love the Adventure Zone, so I was like, oh, well, they do all this amazing stuff, Critical Role, like, I have to be that, because it has to be as extra as possible. And occasionally I even ask the kids, like, are you having a good time? And they're just like, look, I'm like, I still have this, like, anxiety that they're just placating my, like, my emotions. And like, in fact, they're having a miserable time, but, like, a simple situation where they just get to do something fun for 45 minutes and which is different, they seem to really enjoy. So I think being less, by giving them the opportunity and like the space to do it, like I think putting less pressure on myself to make it the most extreme, unique experience would be good, because ultimately it does end up being a really awesome, unique experience regardless of what you do. So
Yeah, amazing. What about Maddie? What's something you would have, advice for new people, or what you would do differently?
I think one of the things which Rob was sort of mentioning before, I'd love to kind of get some more funds and time allocated to myself. But also I'd like to have some resources, like Mick, you were talking about the things you use for storytelling and that, to actually have some resources for players that you hand out over time, like questions about their character, questions about their motives, questions about their involvements in communities, and questions about their involvements with other players. And even something as simple as that, like I've just got to make that sheet and just things to make them, like, basically I want to introduce homework to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, great, amazing. The kids will love it. I can see them lining up now.
because it's non-mandatory and it's for them, and I don't have to mark it.
It's the best kind of homework.
Yeah, and be more prepared it is like I don't also want to like I'm aware I'm a very busy teacher, and then I'm doing this like I do more work for my youth work unpaid than I do paid.
Yeah.
And money is not why I'm doing it. It's just it helps.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to like recognize as a dungeon master, you are doing service, and people pay for service. This is more of a side note. So you make sure you have what you need to feel comfortable with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. Teachers, I think, we're also those people that struggle to sometimes ask for help.
Yeah.
So it's just a skill in life, I guess. Get ready to ask for help, and it may not be monetary because money's not, money's just a currency to get something else. It's usually time and resources. So you might have people, maybe a parent will make cupcakes for your session. That'd be awesome. Maybe a student will make. Maybe one of the students will be a cook in game and outside of game. Like, feel free to reach out a little bit. You are the dungeon master, but you are not the everything slave.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's even out of games, like anytime DMs are running for like friends and stuff as well, it's the same thing, right? Like we spend, for a 3-hour game, we might spend 4 hours prepping, which is, as a teacher, I would never spend more time on a lesson to prep it than, well, I say I never would, I do all the time, but in theory, I shouldn't be spending longer than the lesson itself to prep it. But I think that's knowing your worth is a huge part of it. I don't really have too much to add. I think you guys have both just covered exactly what I would do differently. I would say one thing I would like to do, and it kind of ties into what you were saying, Maddie, is that idea of homework, because I would like to give the kids like a journal, like when they're doing their backstories and stuff, because I think that ownership as well, like I know I've got, every character that I've played has their own like journal, and like kids have, I don't know, something you give them like these little, like I've got one here, these little like 15-cent like little books. They just, once they have their journal, they can sketch it and draw, and it gives them that ownership. So that's something I'll definitely look at adding, moving forward. But that kind of, I guess, is a nice way to kind of finish. So thank you so much thank you to Rob, thank you to Maddie for giving your time. And hopefully people out there, if you do have any other questions, you want to hit us up, you can see our handles spread throughout. Feel free to make any contacts. Would love to reach out, and I said happy to share any resources as well. Anything that I have, I'm more than happy to share. The great thing about D&D is that it is a cheap hobby if you want it to be. There's a lot of OGL stuff, a lot of free downloads, a lot of great stuff in the community there. But you can also spend, extortionate amount of money on dice, and no one's going to judge you. So,
Oh yeah, if you want to.
So take that as it was. But thank you so much, friends, for joining us. We hope you have a fabulous PAX at home this year. Thanks so much, Rob. Thanks, Maddie. Bye, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
See you later. Bye.
See yous.